Hey everyone, welcome back to Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, and yeah, I'm the Chief Sales Sergeant here at Bulletproof Selling. What is a Chief Sales Sergeant? Well, I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. They decided to promote me up that high. We can have a conversation about how that went down, but today I get to help organizations in that same capacity, helping lead their teams toward one goal, and that is to remove hope from how their folks sell. Here at Bulletproof Selling, we've got a book, Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. You're checking us out on YouTube or you're hearing us in the podcast form. We get to do this for a living, help salespeople remove hope from how they operate, because hope is a great thing, but when you get to sales, hope is often the difference between making a sale and losing it. It's the difference between closing one deal and closing 100 deals. So we've been here for a couple of years now, bringing on guests that are expert at helping salespeople take their hope and replace it with something else. Those people that we've had on as guests, they've been best-selling authors, Hall of Fame speakers, folks that are out there leading sales teams around the world, and of course, the folks helping sales teams perform at a higher level. And you can't do that by simply hoping it happens. So after every single guest gets an opportunity to tell us where they see salespeople over-relying on hope, we build a system on this show. So if you're just tuning into us for the first time, hang out to the end, because we're going to be building a system with our guest to solve the problem that we come across. And you can use this system no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals. Now, across all the people I get to work with at Bulletproof Selling, the organizations that have me come in and speak, the folks that have me come in and help them sometimes stand up pipelines from the ground up, one thing that we always find gets in the way of success is not finding the lead list. It's not getting in touch with the right people often enough. You can call enough people, you'll get a hold of some folks. It's what happens when you get somebody on the phone. Because if you don't understand the challenges that they have, you don't understand their business model, the things that are keeping them up at night, to use kind of a hackneyed sales term, it will be very difficult for you to convince them to part with money that they may not have budgeted for the thing that you're selling. So when our guest today, we came across him and said, this is a guy that probably gets it because he understands the power of coming at a problem from the perspective of the people that he's dealing with, getting inside their heads and understanding, how do they see this? Because if I can align with that, then I can lead them down a path that we're going to together, rather than trying to pull or yank them where I want them to go in sales. So we're going to have a great conversation today talking about this topic. It's my pleasure to welcome to the show the CEO of Magnetic, Mr. Steve Schmidt. Steve, welcome to Bulletproof Selling.
Thanks for having me on, man. I love the format. I can't wait to break it down. There's nothing better than tactical advice to keep someone listening the whole time. So that's my goal, is not, hey, here's me. It's how can we keep you listening and solve a problem today? So thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. So I want to hear about some tactical stuff that you had to deal with in your sales career, because folks may not have gotten an opportunity to hear your bio. So talk to me a little bit about your sales journey. It's been a long one, so you can absolutely touch the highlights. Otherwise, we might be here 20 years hearing some great stories, because that's at least how long you've been in the field of sales. So tell us a little bit about that. And I'm curious to know then, who are the people that you're helping today and how are you helping them? Because just helping salespeople is a pretty generic term. I know you have a specific way of getting that done, and I'm curious to hear what that is.
I did get offered a senior citizen discount at the pharmacy last night, so that has been a bit. I've been around since territories and cars and cold calls, and I sold cell phones when I was 22. I sold country radio ads when I was 21, living in a hotel on a trade in Joliet, Illinois. So I had the grit down. Hope was always a strategy for me, and so we can get into that. I think for me, it was eternal optimism and a refusal to quit that got me through the first half of my sales career. I think the problem and the opportunity was, well, you use those when you have them. I didn't feel like I needed more tools. I didn't need Medic or Bant or anything. It was Steve Schmidt's way is the best way. And that works until it doesn't, right? And I now being a CEO of a company that does, help companies, I look back at the learnings along the way and go, holy cow, like there were some significant times where hope was the strategy and it was corrected by a good leader. And so it is not me to credit. It's really that person that I go, man, Matt Millen, Outreach.io, 2017, building from Series A to Series B. Heard him and it will always ring through my head. He said in a cold call, and I use this line all the time, Sean, winners and losers are made every day by choices they make. In business, it's significant. I don't want you to lose. I want you to win. Based off what I heard today, it seems like we can win together. Would you agree? And I was like, man, my life changed forever, because that was like the service attitude of, are we cool? Are we good? Instead of, hey, if I gave you a 10% discount today, would that motivate you to buy? Those are two different feelings, Sean. And that's where my life changed
Mm.
forever, for sure.
No, that's important. And so the folks that you're helping today, how are you taking that experience and applying it to the teams that you're serving? What type of
Mhm.
industries are you normally working in? What size of teams? Tell us a little bit about that.
Typical industries are outside of, believe it or not, your typical LinkedIn crowd, which is software, right? Which is what we think if we're in software. And I've never been in software other than a stint at Outreach. I want to be clear with that. I'm kind of anti-software, and it's not because I don't love it. It's because the model isn't for me. The model of predictable revenue and predictable demos and all the things that make those organizations great bore the crap out of me, right?
Mm.
And I had to admit that to myself. And so where I am now is, I lived enough life to go, well, do the thing you love. Like if you don't love discovery calls, but you can still kind of do them, then don't go train people like Nate Versala on discovery calls or Kyle Assay or those great people, who are out there educating people. Train people on the top of the funnel. And I did that for a while. I opened a lead gen agency. We grew to $5 million a year in run rate year one. And it just crushed me, man,
Mm.
because when you're working for 50 different companies with 32 different cold callers, the neuroplasticity and neurodivergency that is needed is massive. And
Hmm.
so I think what I learned then was, oh, well, there's a different way to do this. How do I help companies? In company two now, so sold that company. And I said, well, what I do it the same way I grew the company that was doing lead gen, which was content, oddly enough. Because you said it best, which is that, hey, man, people are going to be out there trying to find a solution to their problems. I've done it in my personal life. I have changed my life on the internet by finding a person, call it a guru in a subject, following them, learning from them, hiring them as a coach, changed my life forever. And
Mm.
I looked at that moment as so powerful because I said, how did I find them? I found them in a sea of mess on YouTube of all these people trying to sell their thing. And I found the one person that resonated with me who was not like anybody else. And then I watched their explainer series, 5 things in a row, and I was hooked, right? And I was on the next video and it goes, now here's a second piece of advice. And pretty soon I'm on their newsletter and I'm on their Friday calls and then I'm paying them to coach me. And I went, wait a second, why aren't we doing this in software instead
Mm.
of, all the other things we're doing? Because they're building trust on the front end by giving it away and saying, here's everything I know. And if you want to know more and get one-to-one, then you can pay me. But if you want to use this information for free, go for it, right? And I think that's where I go. That's where we help people today is we develop content that takes time to build a good content library like you've built with the show, where they can then go to YouTube and all of a sudden find 100 people who are making decisions in their space in non-selling conversations about the very topic they hope to learn about. So that's where we carve out that expertise, especially for founder-led organizations that are service-based.
Mm.
Fintech is a big one for us, like finance, invoice factoring. We have an enterprise client who sells negotiation training. So those things that are a little outside the box where the founder is a strong point. They have outgrown founder-led sales and they now need the process to power them from a, call it sales and marketing process. We fold that under one umbrella called magnetic. And we say the idea of the company is to get people who are going to, be magnetized to you anyways. Like why be vanilla? Why not just state your point? And those people who agree with you will come running to you. Everybody else will go away, and that's okay. They are not meant to be your customer anyway. So how do we attract those people to see your content and want to dig deeper and then pay you money for your expertise?
Now, let's talk about the challenges that these founder-led organizations, and I'm sure a lot of just buyers within the organization, show up to your door with,
Mhm.
because they recognize there's a problem. But I know that when you really dig into the problem, it's rarely the surface level thing.
Yeah.
So in sales, we find there's usually a lot of hope factored in to our issues. Because if you
Yeah.
remove the hope and you replace it with what you and I are going to be talking about today, suddenly these problems are not problems anymore because we're actually addressing them. So where do you see salespeople relying on hope more than they should?
They hope they understand the problem and they hope that the training they got for 2 or 3 days that was probably really good, that taught them how to sell the solution to the problem, got them to understand what it's like to be in the position of the person in the pain. And I'd say reference your best doctors. They are not the ones who studied the most, went to the best degrees, or the one who can look you in the eyes and provide a very empathetic, and they make you feel a certain way where your trust goes, trust walls go down. And you go, yeah, cool. I'll do whatever you say
Mm.
because I believe you're vested in the best outcome for me. And I think that's where we hope we get it right, but we just don't. We just miss it.
And that's a big problem for salespeople that are selling to decision makers. They've never had their job title. They've never worked inside of that industry, but they're selling a product or a service that they think will help. They
Yeah.
believe it'll help even, but they can't articulate it in the same language that that decision maker needs to hear it in. So I'm
Mhm.
curious, in all the salespeople you've been able to deal with, and of course trained to overcome this issue, what is the mindset really that has to shift first? Because I can't have 30 years of experience to be in that executive's shoes, but I still have to be able to talk their language. What's the first step in changing my own mindset to begin to attack this problem?
Think about the people in your own life that have really trained to change your life. It's probably not the person who, when you walked in, said, "Oh, well, I can solve that. You just need this cast and you got to put it on in 3 weeks, then you'll be fine." Like, it's the person who looked at you and said, "Gosh, that must really hurt. Tell me more." Like,
Mm,
I'm sorry you're going through that, right? Because now you go, "Yeah, I'm sorry too." And you just start telling your guts out because you go, "This person really understands me, man." Even if it's like not, it is, because they're giving me the room to say enough words where you're gonna be able to pick that thing apart and go, "Man, this guy's messed up. I don't even know where to start." Like, let's say, "Wow, sounds like you're dealing with a lot, Mr. and Mrs. CEO." Revenue sounds like one of the problems. I can't solve all of them. If we had to isolate that one, where would you rank it? Number one.
mm.
Why? Well, without revenue, nothing else happens. I agree. Let's have a conversation about it, right? You can't have a good culture without revenue. Okay. So culture's second. A good culture can't pay people. It turns pretty bad pretty quick. And so
Oh yeah.
I think, yeah, really quick, from personal experience, unfortunately, there's an empathy level with CEOs in particular where they want to be understood, and maybe it's a little vain. But for me, in this instance, I could say, if someone came in and hoped to sell magnetic, they would say, "I hope that I'll create great content that they'll really like." And I'll go, "Cool. What does that do for them?" I don't know, their ego. They get to see themselves on. I'd say, "But does it sell revenue?" Well, I can't control that. I'd say, "Well, that's where I have a problem with it." I go, "You can." Because a president can win an election based off of what they say on a campaign or don't say.
Hmm.
So it's fair to say that you can help win more revenue by saying the right things, i.e., the president it wins is going to be the one that resonates most with the largest voter population. They go, "They get me. They understand me." And so we're doing the same thing. We just want to use sales tactics versus empathy, listening, and providing space, which is like the buzzword now, but I think it's an appropriate one, which is let them talk, let them feel, let them say what it is.
So let's build a system to help any salesperson with this. And we're going to be, scooting people together that are selling products and services, and people selling to executives, and people selling to mid-level managers, and people selling to housewives. It's got to cover everything, but I think you and I will be able to make it
Housewives are the
general enough
hardest.
that
Housewives are the
yeah, they
hardest.
are the hardest. I agree. So
Yeah.
when we build systems, and on the battlefield, that's my first experience with the power of systems came from
Mm.
actually operating with Marines and Green Berets and Navy SEALs out there in combat. I realized that they weren't especially brilliant. They didn't have experience to know what to do because most of the time we were under the age of 25. But how were they
Mm.
able to perform? Well, they had
Yeah.
systems underneath them that had been passed down, that they'd been trained in. And so when we use these systems, every new one helps remove a little more hope from how we're operating. So in
Yeah.
sales, it's the same way. I know what you do is you help organizations, Steve, build systems to overcome this problem. So that's what we're going to do here today.
Yeah.
So because we're trimming hope away from our sales strategy, we're going to use this acronym TRIM. Military is big on acronyms, so I just carried it over.
Yeah.
So the T in TRIM is the trigger element of this. If I want to begin understanding the problem and communicating the problem better as a salesperson, regardless of what I'm selling, when do I need to trigger this system? Is it when I find somebody new in my pipeline? Is it when we're
Mhm.
releasing a new product or service? Is it, the beginning of every year? I just need to do this because the market changes so much every year. When do you recommend I trigger this? And what are those triggering elements?
A trigger early on. I like the my
Mm,
therapist says activate it. I love your T for trigger, by the way. But if you trigger it early on, you can continually loop back to it, right? And so triggering that baseline of going, "Okay, tell me more about that," right? That's the question where okay, they want to listen here. And then you can always loop back to that and go, "Well, Sean, I get it, but you said," and I want to quote you, "you were going to do anything to get here. What's changed since then?" And you have to drive it back to them to tell you because something might have changed. And I think you have to earn that right, but you constantly have to plant on that initial trigger, which is, "Man, if I just had this thing, my life would be easier." I'll give you an example. In our world, it'd be, if I just had time to write posts on social media, man, I'd have content. But Anyways, we need appointments, man. We need appointments like yesterday. And we're like, okay, slow down. Slow down. I also want appointments from content. We all do. Seems easy. It's not. It takes a lot of time. You got to live in your DMs. Oh, I can't do that. I'm a CEO. I don't have time to do that. Okay, let's talk about what that looks like. I agree. Would you agree that Mr. or Mrs. CEO, like you want content, you don't have time for content. You're feeling some competitive pressures from those people creating it. And therefore it might be time to deploy somebody to help you make that content. What would that look like in your eyes? If you could pick somebody to help you, what would they look like? Because then I'm pushing it forward too. I'm not going back. That's my therapist too. Don't go back.
Mhm.
Keep it moving forward. Not tell me more about the pain. Just go right to what would it look like? Because if you focus only on the pain, I'm not selling pain. You can talk about your pain. I'm selling a solution for your pain. I want to get you out of there as soon as I can. Like, to have you live in pain is not fun for you or me. So if you go, which you don't have this problem, if you said that, I'd say, great. What are you going to do to change that? What you're looking for is a collaborative partner. You want to create video. You want to be on multiple platforms. You're not sure which one. Fair. What we do is this. Would it make sense for us to look at those platforms for you, make some recommendations? And now you're not relying on hope, because you're not hoping your solution changes it. You're really going back to that initial trigger, that T, and saying, I know they want to create content. That is what we do. So do 100,000 other creators on LinkedIn. What is it going to be where they say this, where I can go, I can actually do that for them. So now it's time to build trust. And how do you build trust? Make them feel understood.
Love it. So if we've got the trigger element, then early on in the conversation, really it's almost sounds like it's inviting them to share and to talk, to create space, as you mentioned. So
Yeah.
that's a great trigger in any conversation, something very few salespeople take the time to do. Usually it's, here's all about me and my stuff and what we do, and would you like to schedule an appointment? None of that is about creating the space to talk about the problem. So now I want to move into the R in trim, which is making it repeatable. Thing we noticed on the battlefield in a high stress environment, I need to know what steps to follow in what order to survive this thing and define mission success. Sales calls can be pretty stressful too. If I finally
Yeah.
driven a meeting with a buyer, I'm on the phone. You have the opportunity to make my year, to keep me in business.
Yes.
If I screw this up, big problems. So I want to make sure that even in
Yeah.
stress, I've got a couple of good steps to follow. What are those 4 or 5 repeatable steps you would advise a salesperson follow to understand the problem, align with the person they're talking with, understand that, we can address this together. This is something I've
Yep.
dealt with, to give that consolation. Yeah, that does suck. And we've helped people like you with it. What are those 4 or 5 steps you'd recommend we go through?
Use verbs.
Mm,
What does that feel like? What get them to paint their own picture and start to use more of those repeatable questions that they can answer very differently. What does that feel like to not have that? And then that's that empathy, right? And then you can always use your proof and go, well, it sounds a lot like another guy I know, John. John was going through the same thing. And now you can insert your little commercial and you go, but this isn't about John. It's about you. What I heard you say, and then it feels like this, right? And then like it feels, it even said feel. You have to get in the feeling of it, because we could go down this path, but I mean, ultimately they're going to buy with emotion, not logic. And so now, until you transition into continuing how they feel while moving it ahead, well, I feel tired, therefore I can't concentrate the next day. Okay, what are the consequences of that? Oh, well, work goes upside down. And then that's sales training 101, call it. But by planting on a feeling and using verbs, it gets them to activate and tell you stories. Those stories become your closing lines. Their closing lines, their persuasion.
Awesome. So if I've got those steps, then, and I'm just going to recap them for myself. Feel free to add anything that we didn't cover. Use those verbs. What does that feel like? Kind of getting them to paint the picture of the problem. It sounds like this, or it sounds like, we've dealt with, I had another person actually went through something pretty similar. Same job title, same industry, specific as you can get to them. But this isn't about them. It's actually about you. So I'm curious to learn more. It sounds like it feels like X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
How does that impact you? How does that affect you? What happens if this isn't solved? So
more feelings, right? More feelings.
Your feelings. Yeah. How does it feel? How will it feel if it's not solved?
Yeah.
What's that final thing then to help
Yeah.
me get back into the tactic of solving the problem, or to set that next step in the sale? Because I've opened up the feelings treasure chest at this point,
Yeah.
which means I've developed trust, which is probably
Yeah.
the most critical thing. I don't want to undercut this, but I also want to give a final tactic that then leads into the next step of the sale, whether it's we meet again, or let's talk about what the solution looks like in delivery times. What would you
Yep.
recommend that final step be?
Here's where you get to come together. So you align at the end. You say, well, it sounds like you're tired and you're kind of sick of this, and you put aside some budget. You don't think it's enough, but you should have started this yesterday, and you're feeling the competitive
Mhm.
pressures. Would it make sense? Now I'm going, would it make sense for us? Not you, not me, because now we're aligning. We're getting married. We're going to hold out my hand and go, would it make sense based off of what we said today? We don't say it would make sense to me, right? Because they know that.
Yeah.
Of course it would, even if it doesn't. Would it make sense for us to, gather our thoughts after this call, but reconvene, da, da, da. Now you're pushing it forward. You're taking it out of the feeling and putting it into action. And now you're getting them to want to move past the pain and move into action. There's a whole nother set of things to deal with here, but we're not for this show, but you got to get them through that, because now the big hurdle at the end is, do I really trust you?
Mm.
You got me on the first call, you got me on the feelings, but now I'm sitting in the chair, you handed me the contract, and I go, I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm just going to go dark on you because I am passive aggressive and I live in the Midwest. So I'm just going to pretend that you don't see
Yeah.
me opening this email every time you send it.
Is that why people go dark? Because they live in the Midwest and it's actually dark there in the winter. Okay,
Tell
now
you,
I understand.
remind me of the pain. Well, we really go dark. It's dark all day here in the winter, but
Yeah.
until you resurface the pain, or the pain resurfaces itself, which is the number one
Mm.
thing. And we always go, well, I don't know why that person came into my inbox 2 months later. Well, the pain resurfaced itself. That's it, in their timeline, not yours. So when, that's its own show, but like, again, there's so many more problems ahead. If you get this one right, though, it gets a heck of a lot easier, because you're always able to go, well, what's changed? What's
Sure
changed?
does. All right, so we've got great repeatable steps then. We'll move to the iron trim, which is making sure this system is improvable. So the way
Mm,
that we might have established trust and talked about our feelings back in 1975 is probably not the way we're going to do it today. It was a whole
yeah.
different culture back then. So I
Mhm.
want to make sure that this system stays up to date with the environment and the times.
Mm.
I also want to make sure it improves in results. So, how would you take what you're doing over the course of a couple of months? Let's say you're using this system over a few months, few hundred calls, whatever that looks like. How do
Mhm.
I want to improve it? What am I going to make sure that I take the time to do or assess to make sure that the system is working as well as it should?
Yeah, you can always improve this by going to your little friend called ChatGPT 4 and saying, what are titles in my space pressed with today for problems? Therefore, you're then saying, oh, what are some great podcasts that discuss that problem? Oh, there you go. There's a podcast with somebody who could buy my stuff talking about the problem I solve. And so you're improving it by understanding it from the other side of the aisle. And then when you do
Mhm.
that and you stay educated, man, you get dangerous. That's where the top 1%ers live, is constant
That's
improvement.
amazing. Yeah, and that's a great way to use AI. In the sales teams I'm able to consult with, something the first I'll tell them after I listen to one of their calls, I'll say, "You didn't address very many problems there." Say, "How do
Yeah.
I know what the problems of a CEO are of a $500 million company? I'm just an account executive.
Yeah.
Let's go to ChatGPT and let me show you how to figure this
Yeah.
out." And it's a great system. So if I've got the trigger, repeatable, improvable, the final piece of this, the M and trim, is making sure it's measurable.
Ooh.
So if I'm taking the time to not just jump right into my demo or my pitch at the beginning of a call, which a lot of salespeople do, probably most of them do,
Yeah.
taking the time to open up feelings, it might take slightly longer at the outset for me to drive that next step, which would make my boss happy because they see pipeline movement. So I
Yeah.
need to justify the use of this system, make sure it's better than the way I was doing things before. What am I
Mhm.
measuring though? How do you
Mhm.
measure the trust that I develop on a single conversation?
Easy tip. There's a reason I brought up action words. You go into your call recording system and you look for the keywords to enter, and you type in the words feel, look, see, um, sound, right? You type in your competitors' key names too, by the way. And now you're able to say, well, I rank my first calls on whether or not they hit 2 feel words, right? And then a simple measurement. That's it. Don't move the goalposts on them. Keep them. Okay, you got 2 feel questions. Maybe they were weird, but you have them. Once we
Hmm.
get those and we can move past that, then we can move on that. Did you set the appointment? Did you take 2 no's? It's like, well, they're going to say no unless they feel understood. And so I start there. And that's what we put in our system for our calls is, do we have the look, feel, sound? Um, because that was my biggest struggle is I always could sell anything, but I would plow people over. And until I went back and worked with Matt Millen 9 months ago, and I wanted to crawl out of my chair, I was like, this is the worst, because I was 44. I just owned a company, sold it, went to consult for Matt to spin up an organization. He's like, man, your discovery calls are terrible. You just jump right into it. And I had to go back and relearn all those things that I was teaching people. And that's that moment of truth where you go, wait, I'm getting paid to teach people this, but I'm not even able to do it myself.
Mm,
Took me a couple days is all, but like, we got to be able to do the thing we're training. And that was a stark realization that it's not as easy as we make it sound on this call. Because you got to go
that's
do it in
powerful.
real time. And so I empathize with all of you because I have my own company. I am our salesperson. I am our hardest critic on myself because I can really only say like, hey, Steve, you didn't hit quota. Why? And I could go, well, the leading metric says you didn't have enough appointments. The lagging metric is really, oh, you had enough, but you didn't dig for pain. You just said, our content's great. You need content. And they were like, well, okay, never mind. You don't understand me. We're going to go hire an SDR. Well, they hired an SDR. Why? Why? Because the SDR is a logical choice. Why? Because everybody else is doing it. Doesn't mean it makes sense or not. I didn't cross the barrier of trust with him. They just went, well, I'm sure he makes great content, but he's not for me. Doesn't get
And
me.
you've actually advocated people measure something that I don't think has ever been talked about on this show before, which is in a single conversation to measure leading indicators before you measure
Yes,
lagging indicators. And you can
always.
absolutely do that in a pipeline, right? How many conversations did I drive, and
Mhm.
how many emails did I send, and how many all these things happen before the quote is issued or before the proposal's out that creates the
Yep,
lagging indicator of the closed deal. But you're
yep,
saying bring it down to the micro level in a single conversation. The leading indicator of success is not setting a next step. The
yeah,
leading indicator of success is, do I understand the problem?
100%.
And have we communicated that? That's brilliant, sir. Thank you so much for bringing that.
I'll drill down one step further for all you CROs
Yeah.
out there and finance people. When we went back and we had no customer attrition in a year, then we lost 3 customers in a month. And I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Why did we lose them? They said, well, I don't know. I said, go back to the original calls, dig them up. Let's find out what we talked about. They were all looking for lead gen, which is not what we do. We talked them into content. And so as soon as they found out we weren't what they were gone. They cost us a bunch of money,
Yeah.
right? So all of the things we thought we were selling them without truly asking them, what does it feel like? How does this sound to you? Instead, it was selling on bells and whistles. Those customers left quickly because they did not get what they wanted because we were trying to be something we were not. Think of a relationship. You show up, pretty girl, you're nervous. You're trying to be what you think she wants versus a confident version of yourself. And she wants a second date, but then she goes, this isn't really the person that I saw on the first date because now you're your real self. Well, we turned into our real selves and we were not what we said we were. Uh,
Mhm.
we now know that when those words are said, there's an alert sent to me as a task that says deal in jeopardy before it's even
Mm.
closed. And so now we go, well, do we really want this money? Because
Yeah.
the data say, by the way, I didn't know that. It's that it was the data says, it's the data say. Data is plural. Data say, isn't that
Okay.
weird? The data
Yeah.
say, gosh, it's so weird to say. I got corrected on it big time the other day. It turns out they were right. The data say that if you went back and looked at why you lose your customers, the first call will tell you why, not the implementation. The
Mm.
first call with the SDR will tell you why.
Awesome. The first call will tell you why. That's a pretty good way to end the show, sir. So for people that want to get deeper in your world, they want to find out more about Magnetic. I'm sure you're releasing stuff just like this all the time. I know I want to get into it. How do
Yes,
people
sir.
get deeper into your world and connect with you?
YouTube is the best place. I say that right now because we're going all in on it in 2024. If you type in, and this is the fun part, type in content-led selling. We could not be more proud that we're the first thing that comes up. And that's what we teach our
Mm.
customers is how do you use the right keywords to say like we're going to show up. And so type in content-led selling. You'll educate yourself on it, which is the better cause here, but you'll see us at the top and you'll go, well, how do I get at the top of my category? And I'll say, talk to us and we can show you how. Because you can make great videos, but unless you're showing up in a feed or the next short, you're really missing the boat on a YouTube strategy, which is new for a lot of B2B companies. It was new to us last year and we get it now and we're going all in. So YouTube, content-led selling, you'll find Steve Schmidt video number 1.
Awesome. We'll make sure we're connecting over to that. And of course, getting you on LinkedIn to get the connections with folks. So they can see what you're doing there as well.
Yeah,
Steve, it's been awesome talking with you, sir. For all the folks catching
too, sir.
us on the live stream, make sure you're subscribing to that YouTube channel. If you're hearing us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify, go ahead and leave us a review and let salespeople know this sales podcast is really about tactics. It's about removing hope, not just high level strategy, but what can we do today to not only sell more, but serve more. And that's what you've been doing for us today, Steve. Thanks so much for giving back to the sales community with your time. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.
Thank you.